You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. This is Trevor Wade. I'm the Coonhound Program Manager here at UKC, and I'm joined by the Director of Hunting Ops, Alan Gingrich. What's going on, Alan?
Well, just got back in from lunch, and it is pouring down out there today.
Yeah.
We've got so much rain here lately.
Yeah. I think I mowed the yard Monday, and
Yeah.
it's going to need mowed as soon as it dries up.
Yep. I'm going to probably be mowing tomorrow sometime before I leave.
Yeah, you got a late flight going down to
Yeah.
Mississippi to talk beagle gun dog.
Yep, the red eye I'm taking. I thought it was 7 o'clock in the morning. Looks like it's 7 o'clock in the evening when I leave.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, it'll make for a tight day, but it's all good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
We got a different podcast today. You know, we've both been just so busy. It's that time of year, and we know that. And Autumn Oaks is just 2 weeks. 2 weeks from today, we'll be down there already.
Yeah,
setting up already
as we're recording this. Yep,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, you're right. And so today, you know, we don't have a ton of topics put together, so we're going to talk about ourselves a little bit today. So that's a little bit different. That's a first.
Okay.
Yeah. But first, we're going to start out with some breaking news. You know, there's a lot of coonhound clubs out there in the country. Whenever you're talking about clubs that can put on 150 dog events, that list gets exponentially smaller.
Yeah. And
we're talking about tournament champion regions here. And the club down in Kilgore, Georgia, Tri-County Club that's been hosting that TOC region event ever since the inception of TOC a few years ago, they decided to step away. Obviously taxing on a club to do that year after year after year. So, but we sure appreciate that club and
absolutely.
Philip Foster, Kevin Rowe,
and you
the
know,
whole club down there.
Absolutely, you know, and ever since they've had it 3 years now, I guess, and just no problems at all. Nope. I don't know if he's even had a question down there, other than a question about where the lights got shut off or whatever. Why the lights get shut off?
Right. Yeah. But hey, but that caused, you know, any time that you're changing stuff up, you know, it has effects on other things, and with the Georgia one moving out of the way, we had a huge gap there in the south central part of our hunting area. Mm-hmm. So that kind of left us with the decision to make on the Kentucky region as well. And I reached out to Jeff Wilson, who we've dealt with a lot with the Lancaster, Kentucky region there, Dix Rivers, the host club. And they're also just kind of wore out, the club. After a few years, just things happen and pop up, and we've decided that the Kilgore, Georgia, and the Lancaster, Kentucky regions are going to be no more. We're moving both of those regions. But we were able to. Well, I want to appreciate Lancaster too for stepping up. They were a late addition in the first year. Remember, we had way more dogs qualified than we thought. And,
because we just started with the 4 regions to begin with. I almost forget about that now, but yeah.
We added Lancaster right there before really entries opened, and they really saved our hind end on that. Yeah. They've hunted a lot of dogs there and had some good scores over the past few years. So appreciate Lancaster there in Kentucky for
really helped us out with all that. Yep, yeah. Sure did.
But with that being said, we had two voids to fill there, and we felt like obviously in the south and the southeast was our biggest holes there, and so we went to the drawing board. One club that's been really interested in the Tournament of Champions event, and wanted the possibility of hosting a region if it ever became available is the 10 Mile Hound Association in 10 Mile, Tennessee. Obviously, the president there is Alan Roberts. He's one of our field reps, and they're a really good club. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the 10 Mile Hound Association. They put on a lot of major events. And honestly, if you look at a map, it makes sense to put one there.
Yeah, it does. You and I were looking at that map, and we do that a lot with the world zones and other, you know, just look at, you know, what would look good geographically. You know, there's a lot of other things that come into play as well, but that is one thing we look at. And this, when we moved, kind of moved our dots around and flagged that, and then kind of looking where else to go, which you're going to get into in a minute. But that's pretty cool to look at that, and I really like the way it turned out geographically.
Right. So then we have them there that kind of, we feel like that takes care of most of Tennessee. You know, Eastern Kentucky is probably going to go there. Western to Central Kentucky may head up to Ohio or Indiana, which won't be too far of a drive. We checked all those driving distances.
See, Kentucky had a big number there.
That's right.
So that was a little bit of a concern, something we talked about, and we actually reached out to the LaGrange Club just to make sure, hey, if we do this, you may get a few entries, and they said, bring it on.
Right. They were prepared. They had too many entries last year. So.
They had a lot of guides they didn't need.
That's right.
Guides. Yep.
Yeah. And so where I feel like our biggest hole was, and I think we both looking at the map felt like the East Coast there was probably our biggest weakness. South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe Virginia, that area. And one thing that we pay attention to clubs. We look at numbers. We are both on social media. We see what clubs are putting in a lot of effort and doing things to drive entries and trying new inventive things. And one of them that stands out, and I think we've talked about on this club before, is the Palmetto Coonhounds Association in Manning, South Carolina.
Yep.
And we, I think, actually, you fielded a call, or you made a call to someone in South Carolina who we both trust and respected their opinion to get their opinion on it. And he had nothing but great things to say about that club. Just basically said that's if you're talking about South Carolina, that club probably has the best hunting in the state, and they can hunt a lot of dogs. They host some the Hall of Fame hunt in South Carolina every year. They put a lot of dogs in the woods that weekend. And so we called Nelson Gibbons with the club, and he's our corresponding officer for the club, and he was ecstatic. And
he was, and they're very active. And there's a good example of a club that is putting a lot of effort into their events, and they're getting paid for it.
Absolutely,
we can use them as a role model, and we have. And I think that's what you were referring to when we made mention of them here on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, or a month ago, or whenever it was. But yeah, so and it's turned out good. And then put that flag there yet and look at everything geographically across the country for the regions for the TOC. Looks good.
Absolutely.
Looks good.
If you're in the South,
tickled. If
you're in the South or the North, the way that they're out there, you have a pretty reasonable driving distance to wherever you're going. And that's what we're shooting for. Yep. Obviously, got to be good clubs, but we want everybody to have a reasonable driving distance. And I think we accomplished that. Yeah. So there you go. Manning, South Carolina, and 10 Mile, Tennessee are our new TOC regions. Yep. They're going to join our other 4 holdovers that are still good to go. Talked to all of them in the past couple weeks. Kirksville, Missouri, LaGrange, Indiana, Mount Gilead, Ohio, and Conway, Arkansas are still all good. So add 10 Mile, Tennessee, and Manning, South Carolina to that list.
Yep, exciting. I like it.
Our partners at Dogtra have just launched an exclusive program available only to active UKC competitors. So if you've competed anytime this year or plan to compete in any future UKC events, you can qualify to receive exclusive benefits through Dogtra. Take advantage of this exclusive program and become a Dogtra competition field staff today. To sign up, visit dogtra.com/Dogtra competition field staff. That's dogtra.com/Dogtra competition field staff. For everyone attending Autumn Oaks, Dogtra has some exciting activities happening at the Dogtra booth. They are offering free on-site repairs for all Pathfinder users on a first-come, first-served basis. Dogtra is also doing a big sweepstakes at Autumn Oaks. They're giving away a complete Pathfinder 2 tracking and training system. Visit the Dogtra booth in the Hunt building to enter to win. All right, well, with that being said, we've done a bunch of these podcasts now over a year. We've been doing this stuff, and I don't know, a lot of the people out there, we meet a lot of people every year and talk to them, but a lot of them probably don't know where we come from, our history in hounds, and like I said, with everything going on, this might be a cool opportunity for people to get to know us a little bit better.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of goes against what we talked about early on. You know what I'm going to say? I said, hey, let's be careful not talk about ourselves too much. But I think the intent here, I think what we have is good, just to give people maybe who don't know. There's a lot of people who know kind of our history and this and that, but there's probably a lot more that don't. And just give them a little bit of our own personal history, I guess. So I like the idea.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So let's start from the beginning here.
I can tell you what it's going to do. It's going to be talking about some of this old stuff or whatever from back in the day. It's going to give me the urge again to be out there competing, and how much I really miss it, because I do miss it.
Yeah, I've kind of been fighting. I actually made a post on social media platform the other day. We're leading into Autumn Oaks and everything, was thinking about that, and I'm out there hunting, and I miss, the competition was great. I miss getting dogs ready for the competition and trying to set dogs up and put them in different situations, and I just miss that aspect of it for some reason. I don't know.
Yep.
But hey, let's start out from the beginning. You want to tell us a little bit about how you got started in hounds, or what kind of piqued your interest in hounds?
Well, I don't know. I think I would start out by talking about my first influences was my grandfather. His name was Bill, and he had horses and hounds, beagles and coonhounds both, and that's what I have today, really
Yeah.
still. So I would say he was my first influence when it came to hounds. And I can remember early on going there to the farm with mom and stuff, and he had the horses, and in the wintertime, probably only horse people might know this, and it's not, I don't think it's anything they do anymore, but in the wintertime, he kept pregnant mares in one of his barns. He had a couple of barns, but one of them was set up for pregnant mares, and they collected urine, and it was something that they sold. So out behind this barn was their exercise lot, and that's where he had two coonhounds tied up,
Oh yeah.
a walker and a black and tan. But I remember I really gravitated towards this walker dog. His name was Ace, and I remember going out there just as a little kid, and to the best that I can figure out, and that's actually my mom that used to tell me that when I brought it up, how old I would have been around 4 years old. So that was kind of my first introduction to coonhounds, and I remember
Yeah.
Ace. I remember walking out there and just the way that little lot smelled, I guess, a lot of people would think, well, that's just kind of whatever, but that was my first introduction to it. So, and then the other thing that I remember about it was the first part of hunting was when I was over there, and one day I saw where they got all their hunting gear together. They had these long silver flashlights, all the old D-cell flashlights
Yeah.
with the leather strap on it. Had that stuff laid out and a bunch of other things, and I was really intrigued by this. Turns out it was the first night of season.
Oh, okay.
And they were getting ready. We stayed there. They took off, my grandfather and a couple of his boys. They took off went out back, and I could hear the hound running back there that evening, early evening, and that intrigued me.
Yeah.
I couldn't go. Mom wouldn't let me go, but I still remember that, and that was the first for me.
Yeah. I guess for me, my biggest, I'd always had a thing for dogs when I was younger, and just always really enjoyed them. But by the time I came along, my dad had coon hunted before I was born. But by the time I got there and my brother got there, didn't have hounds anymore.
Mhm.
He always had. He has a big photo album still to this day down in his where he sits at to watch TV. I guess call it the den or whatever. And you go through there, and there's a lot of hunting and fishing pictures. But then at the end, there's some pictures of his old plot hounds that. A lot of our family down there, a lot of his side of the family has hounds, and they coon and big game hunt with them, mostly plot dogs
Oh,
for
yeah.
the most part. The Moseses and the Hicks down there. Probably a lot of people will know them that's listening to this.
Yeah.
And but we never had hounds. We would go a few times a year with like Bill Hicks or Gene Hicks
Yeah.
or some of those guys, and it was a blast.
Yeah.
I was kind of obsessed with it, but I didn't get my first hound until I was probably 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
And it was a beagle, actually. That was my first hound ever. Was actually my first 2 or 3 hounds were beagles, and we would go rabbit hunting more than we went coon hunting.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, my dad he never has got back into the hounds really. He'll go with me sometimes, but he's just he likes deer hunting, he likes turkey hunting, he likes going fishing. We did that stuff since I was old enough to walk.
Yeah.
I've been doing that stuff with him, but the hounds came a little bit later
Right.
after that.
Do you remember going on your first coon hunt?
My very first coon hunt, I'm trying to think back. I would have been younger. I don't remember my exact first one.
See, I don't either. I know I went with my grandfather and my uncles a couple times, and most of what they hunted was there on their own farm that they had, and then the neighbors' farms. Back there, everybody just hunted in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
And actually back then, believe it or not, the hides were worth a lot back in those days. I didn't know that at the time, but they really were.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of hunters made their extra income,
Sure.
for Christmas and things like that, but so I don't remember that my first time either, other than going. I just remember that first night when they brought all that hunting gear out that I was talking about. But I'm kind of like you. My first dog was my brother and I got found an ad in the local classified paper.
Yeah.
In the classifieds for puppies, and these happened to be red bone puppies, and it was $35.
Yeah.
And we had been looking, and we $35 for this thing. It's hard to remember $35,
Times have
But we
changed.
mowed neighbors' yards, and things like that to collect this money for this $5 a whack, is basically what it was. And my brother and I, luckily for me, we could kind of go in and split, our money that we had. And when we went and picked her up, her name was Jody. So, and boy, did we put her through the training stuff that summer, all summer long, and never showed her a live raccoon.
Is that right?
But we laid a lot of tracks. Grandpa, leaned on him for, how to train this puppy and everything. And he, we got scents and a leather drag and all this, and we had a farm. I grew up on a farm too, so we did it all across the road from the house there, one of the farm fields. And boy, she treed on a lot of drags. I can't believe we didn't just ruin that dog.
Well, that's funny you say that. Well, I guess going back to my side of it, we lived in the city primarily there in town, and but we had a lot of family that had land out. We call it out at the farm. We'd say it took about 15 minutes to get there, and there was a few thousand acres out there that we could tromp along. And so I never had hounds until after I got out of high school, actually, and when I got in college, I actually got my first hound. And it happened I was at church, and my dad calls he's turkey hunting, and he's got this English red tick is treed there. He's been hearing it all morning. And he goes to inspect it, and it's worn out around it, and this dog's skin and bones, has no collar on or anything. And we looked around for an owner, and that was actually the first. I kept the dog and I hunted it, and it was a nice coon dog. It was the first dog I ever had.
Yeah.
A couple months, I had actually gotten a pup from Bill. It was a plot hound, so that was my first pup I got shortly after that to hunt with it and kind of teach it the ropes. And we actually found, I was hunting one night with a buddy, and he heard the dog tree and said, "I've hunted with this dog before," and we were actually able to find the owner of the English dog at that point. So then I just had the pup, and you were talking about how you didn't show yours a live coon. I did. I showed this plot pup, I don't know, way too many. I ruined this plot. It would tree a coon, but it would always backtrack, and I feel like it was probably always looking and trying to verify by sight that there was a coon there. And was that a recommendation by your grandfather, or was it just dumb luck, or what do you think?
Not necessarily. I don't know if he just never trained like that, or I don't know how he trained. That's just the way he told us what we should do. Matter of fact, I think he got us the scent.
Okay.
I think he got it from the Bill Boatman catalog or whatever.
Yeah.
He sent us this bottle of scent, and we wore her out, but we never showed her a live raccoon. Never did see one. And going back a little bit more on that, I remember the first night of season, Grandpa came over, and we didn't know he was coming over, but him and Grandma both came over, and that tickled us, my brother Paul and I, and that Grandpa was here because it was the first time he was actually going to see her in action. Now this was going to be the real deal, It was, and we cut her loose, same places that we always did all these drags. We'd drag these, lay these drags out through the cornfield that summer and everything, probably, several hundred, 200-300 yards.
Put her to the test.
Yeah, put her to the test. Started, with fence posts, and then gravitate. I remember Grandpa said, "Hey, you got to start, setting up trees, when you, instead of the fence posts or whatever." So, and we did that. But on this night, there wasn't going to be any scent, and I was a little worried. Glad Grandpa was there, but how you're kind of hope your dog's gonna.
You want it to perform in front of others.
Yeah,
sure.
This is our hero here,
Yeah.
And by golly, it didn't take her long. She struck in, and she was a little deeper than she normally was when where she found this track. And we had about halfway back this cornfield. It was probably a 10, 12 acre cornfield, but it had a little ditch winding through it, and she struck right off the edge of that ditch. I remember she drove it back to the back end of towards the west there. And just before you get to the woods, maybe 50, 60 yards short of the woods, the big woods back there, there's one apple tree, and that's where she hooked it up.
No kidding.
I remember I can still remember it like it was last night.
You were floating to the tree, weren't you?
Yeah. I remember when she located and everything starts treeing, Grandpa looked over and he said, "She's treed, boys."
That was probably a pretty cool moment.
It was. And then to go in there and see the coon, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was awesome.
Stick with you forever.
Yeah.
Was there was there ever any times when you were first where you got discouraged at all, or were you pretty much have you been with the hounds ever since then? Or was there ever a time when you might have stepped away or got discouraged with what you had?
We were, and I think for us, we grew up on a farm, so we always had a lot of work to do. And it seemed like any time we even had, an hour of time, we would grab we would, work on Jody, or we had a couple of beagles too later on in life.
Yeah.
We were like, I want to say I was like 12 We were like 11 and 12 when this was all going down. But we would grab a dog and go to the back corner and turn the dog loose. We had a couple hair up there too and stuff, but any little time we got to, we would, that's one thing we enjoyed to do.
Yeah.
But hey, going back, one other part I wanted to, that was kind of cool in later years, fast forward, 20, 30 years, I guess here, my brother and I would hunt a lot together too. Excuse me. But going back to that, my grandpa always lived on the same farm, but he ended up with cancer, got sick and everything. But, and he couldn't go hunting or anything like that anymore by the time we were down here and hunting our own dogs. But we would go to his farm and he'd want us to let him know, and he would sit out on the porch and he would listen to our dogs.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a full circle thing for us, or for me anyways. I remember that's where I was at basically when I heard his dogs, the first time, and that was always cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, and he loved it. You could tell. And that's just, he never competition hunted or anything like that, but he loved to hear hounds run.
Yeah.
And you could tell he enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it was after that original English dog that we had that was kind of started, we didn't have it. I didn't have the dog long enough for it to teach me the ins and outs of coon hunting. And like I said, at that point, my dad was out of it. He's a real good woodsman. You can take him and he has a lot of sense on that stuff. But as far as hounds go, he didn't give me a lot of advice or anything. And me and the kid I was hunting with, Alex Thomason's his name. He lived not too far away. We hunted a lot, and we both we went through dogs. I mean, we got stuck trading and to go. And now when I talk to people, that's why I tell them, like, try your dogs out before you. If somebody's giving you a dog, there's probably a reason they're giving it for you. To you. Don't start out with pups, because I made these mistakes. I made a lot of these mistakes, and for a few years, man, I bet we could count on two hands how many coons we may have treed over months and months. It was tough. Yeah. And I would say I almost got out of it a few times, just very discouraged. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was one time I was actually on the forums, and it was a guy in London, Kentucky. I believe his name was Michael. I wish I could still find that message where he had a post he was selling out, and he was I actually went up there, and he had two English hounds, two female Englishes, and they were both named Pepper. Just ironically, but ended up I got both of them. I think I got a pretty good deal on both of them. I came back, and I only wanted the older one. The younger one was just over a year old, just started, and I didn't want that. I already had a started dog, so I actually sold her and recouped quite a bit of the money. And that dog, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be sitting here or being coon hunting anymore. She from the beginning, she taught me so much about it, and a lot of the knowledge that I have today about maybe how to hunt dogs or where to hunt or where to drop or where coons may be came from hunting with her, actually, from a dog rather than a person, which is strange to say, I guess.
Yeah. So when did you first get involved in actual hunting at the club and going to hunts?
It would have been after we got her. Like I said, me and Alex we split her, and we were both hunting quite a bit, and we hunted a ton. And
did you get her with that with the intent of competing with her? Or?
That was always my goal. We in Southeast Tennessee, we weren't stacking furs or anything. We didn't kill very many coons at all. But so I always wanted to get into the competition hunts. That was my goal.
Knew about competition,
right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't long after we got her, we hunted her some, and then we eventually, it wasn't very long at all, we started going to our first competitions. First competition hunt we went, actually Drew, Gene Hicks, who I talked about, that's some of our family, and he was hunting 6-time Albert. I'll never forget it. It was the win that made
that's a name that was
a Grand Night champion.
Yeah, you've heard a lot of. Yeah. 6-time Albert.
It was funny.
2-time Albert. 6-time Albert.
So, yeah, this one's way down the road from 2-time. So, yeah, 2-time was back in the mid 90s.
Yeah, that was before your time.
I was still pretty young then, but this win made a 6-time Albert a Grand Night champion. I'll not forget it. But I learned a lot, and man, I really enjoyed that hunt. And that was the first competition hunt, and Pepper, she won us a few casts. She was 5 or 6 years old. She was really accurate dog. She didn't make a lot of mistakes, but she was slower, and that cost her a lot of casts. But when she treated coons, and we won a few casts with her that way.
Do you remember the first one you ever won with her?
I believe it was at a club in Tellico. Tennessee. We won a cast with her, and I think it was just a coon or two staying out of trouble, and that's what it took. And it wasn't a great feeling.
Yeah.
What about you? How did you get into the competition stuff?
Well, it's a lot of people say that they remember their very first trophy they got, and for some reason, as ate up as I was with it, I really don't. I remember the first club I went to and the first couple of events I handled a dog in.
Yeah,
but I really don't remember the first time I actually won a cast, and I'm not sure why that is, but I just don't. But yeah, so my first hunts were, I don't remember. It had to be either 89 or 90 was my first one. I actually hunted. It wasn't even my own dog, So by this time, Jody was done, dead and gone. I think we might have raised a litter of pups, but but this is after school now for me. I'm like in my early 20s or almost 20, I guess, or whatever, late teens, I guess. But anyways, first one is 89 or 90. It was at the old Albion, Indiana club, I remember. And I remember that's where I saw Mackie Mans. Oh. And I don't know what it was about Mackie. He's a blue tick guy, and he was kind of a big name in the area. And I think I've probably seen some of his ads in the magazines,
Okay, so you got the magazine before.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, same for me.
Yeah. Yep. So I recognized Mackie, and I'm like, wow, there's Mackie Mans, For some reason, I just remember that. Another one, that's where I met Steve Burkholder. Oh, you know Steve too.
Oh yeah.
And he was running around like a little rooster that he was back then.
You couldn't get away from the blue tick guys up there, could
you? No. But so I remember I hunted a dog named Levi. Yeah, a blue tick, and I didn't win my cast, and he was all right, but hey, I was green, and but I remember that was my first hunt with old Levi. And then one of my next hunts, I may have hunted him a time or two after that, but another one I remember is I had a buddy named Frank Robbins that we pleasure hunted with some, and a good guy, and he had a dog. He was kind of getting into it. We used to play some music back then, and he'd play with us sometime, and he he liked to kind of hunt with us too or whatever. But he's so much that he ended up getting his own coonhound. And it was a dog named Buster. Miller's Heavy Metal Buster was his name. And a great coon dog. But one thing I remember about him, he would frickin' bark all night long. Couldn't get this dog to shut up, but he was a barker at night for some reason.
Yeah, be good these days.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, I remember the first night I hunted him was at the Wyatt Club there in South Bend, Indiana. Where the Wyatt Constellation. That's right. Yeah, right there. And I always liked that club too. Just seemed like I had a lot of luck there. But anyway, so my first hunt with him, some of our listeners will, some of the older ones will remember a guy named Charlie Hyde. Charlie Hyde he was from that area, had a lot of good dogs back in the day, but Charlie was Charlie. He was a vocal guy, and I remember I rode with him, and he looked, I remember when I brought this dog up to put in the dog box, I guess he had his tail up and stuff, and he looked at me and he's like, "Man, is your dog mean?" I'd never seen him fight or anything, but long story, and I say that, but my dog and Charlie's dog ended up in a dog fight. We both got scratched that night.
Happens.
Oh yeah, it was. He kind of let me blamed my dog for it and everything. So that was my first experience with old Charlie Hyde.
Yeah,
but Charlie had some of the old Hyde's Boone and some of those old dogs back in the day, and that was off of Yadkin River Tom. Okay. So you kind of know that strain. And then his boy Jay, he had some of the Hardwood Maniac dogs. So that's where you still see some of those today or whatever. Yeah. That's where they came kind of from that area. So yeah, but that was some of my first hunts that I remember.
Yeah, I guess I didn't get too hot and heavy into the hunts until after we had Pepper and we were starting to tree coons. Then I wanted to get a younger dog, and at that time I got a pup out of Ugly Stick, black and tan. I always liked the black and tans for some reason. They just what I liked as my preference. And I went over to West Tennessee, Robert Church's place, and got it. And on the way back, it was a bad storm. I'll never forget that. And I actually had to pull over and get a hotel that night, and was able to talk the front desk down a little bit and got a cheap hotel to ride out the storm. I wasn't supposed to have the pup. I didn't tell them I had a puppy with me, but then we got back. But we ended up that dog was the first dog that I ever personally made night champion. And we did good with him, called him Bo. And he was good young. A lot of those dogs now start young, and I think we kind of blew him up, maybe pushing him too hard. and learn from that. You just learn as you go. You learn a lot of stuff like that, I think. And but you
see,
know,
that's what we talk about all the time. There's no experience.
right?
You got to learn a lot of these things. You start somewhere and shoot. We all do.
That's right. Yeah, you can't look down on anybody because
Right.
everybody had to go through tribulations
Yep.
and situations to get there. But I put down some mentors on here, and I think you'll probably talk about some of yours that you had in competition hunting.
Yeah,
One of them is actually Wyatt Barnett. We both know Wyatt.
Yep.
He's actually a couple years younger than me.
Yeah.
But he got into competition hunting just as a young kid. If you look through some of our magazine, he's 9-10 years old, hunting his own dogs.
Yeah.
I know right there at his house, you could hunt behind Wyatt's house for miles and miles, and he could just cut loose back there. And
I first met him.
winner.
I first met him down there at the Youth Nationals when we had it there at 10 Mile.
Yeah.
He won it actually.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
good kid.
You go into his right there by his kennels. He used to have that trophy and that magazine cover there, and he taught me a lot about competition hunting. You know, there's more to it than just having a decent dog. You got to put your dog in different situations and hunting against different dogs and know everything your dog's doing. Another one is Allen Roberts. You know, I went and got my first coon light from him back when he owned Dakota Lights. Now he owns Outlaw Lights, which I think they work together pretty closely still to this day. Him and the Franklins, but without knowing it, you know, his club, 10 Mile Club, him and Roger Bells down there at 10 Mile, they had their club was just the one to go to in that area. And I know you probably had one too. When you went there, they're just bigger crowds. You know, you're probably going to be in good hunting. And everything just went smooth, and it was always a blast to go there. And he always had a big effect on me on how he put hunts on. And those are some of my biggest mentors coming in, probably to competition coon hunting anyways.
And good mentors. You're talking about one that's got a lot of experience than a younger guy, good young guy, absolutely. And you need those.
Absolutely, you do. Everybody does.
Yep.
Yeah. Was a couple people shape the way you?
Yeah. You know, my brother Paul and I, we used to do everything together. We were, you know, from young kids and everything back home on the farm. We hunted together. You know, when we had a break, we would both be doing the same thing, and that was hunting or what have you. And that just kind of played through most of our lives. You know, and same we would join the Whitley County Coon Hunters there in Columbia City, Indiana, at the same time. He had hunted with somebody in the area there that was a club member, Larry Smith or somebody, that kind of invited him to come to the club. And so he and I both went down there, and that was a little intimidating, to be honest. You know, we were excited about it, you know, but it was something new and had never really, you know, I had been to a couple of clubs, you know, hunting now, but as far as, you know, becoming a member and all this and that, you know, but and didn't really realize it to begin with, but the Columbia City Club, and I'm sure there's a lot of clubs like that, have a deep history, and that one is pretty old, you know. So there were guys that would hunt there, and some of the members, you know, were like the Bellers, you know, Russell Beller, and I don't know how many world champions he has, you know. A lot, you know. Brian Whitted he was one of the younger guys then. Yeah. Dick Brothers would hunt there a lot of times. You know, he had a world champion, Charlie Creek Terra. Yeah. Charlie Miller had the Beaver Lake Magic dog, and Brian Ruckman. Now, Brian Ruckman didn't come to the club as much, you know, but Charlie would come out there. Beaver Lake Magic, my brother and I used to play golf all the time, and that's the only coonhound I know that has his golf course named after it. Right. Magic Hills there in Columbia City was named after Beaver Lake Magic, which was a part of Charlie Miller's farm at one time. But then, you know, Mackie Mans would always be around with his blue ticks. I mentioned Burkholder and Hunting Droop Jr. and Doug Cheek was another one I remember from the club. I mentioned these because they had a lot of people, you know, that helped us, and not you know, a lot of these more than others. But Doug Cheek had the stylish hack dog. He won the ACHA World Hunt. And Terry Coulter had Beller's Ann, who won the PKC National Championship. And then also another ACHA champion that he had was Miller's Roxanne, won the ACHA World Championship. And I remember a little story about Terry. Terry's about my age. And we hunted a lot together, but I remember when he went to pick up Roxy. And Roxy was well known in our area of just a solid dog, and she could put a whipping on about any dog, you know, on a lot of nights. But Ron Wigman was an auctioneer in Fort Wayne who bought this dog. Terry and I went over to Ron's office, and he gave us a grocery sack full of money, full of cash to go buy this dog. And I remember on the way over to Shipshewana, Dean Miller had this dog, and Terry said, "Hey, can you count that money? Can you count that money? Make sure we have enough here," because Terry was going to be the handler on this dog, you know. And I did, and I was like, "Holy cow, Tara, this was crazy," So this was mid '90s or whenever it was, and I've never seen that much cash in my life. I'm not going to say how much it was, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. But anyways, we went over there and picked up that dog. But other guys, there was like Mike Puckett was in the club. He was hunted a pretty good blue dog named Shaker. I remember was a really good dog. Steve Dunn hunted some stock off of Nocturnal Nailer. Katie was one of the good dogs there. But then another name that was kind of synonymous to that club that I was really intrigued by was Laverne Miller.
Yeah.
So that if you remember, if you know now, the Treeing Walker Association
Absolutely.
does that Laverne Miller Sportsmanship Award. That was Laverne's old club right there. So, and I remember one of his sons later in life came over to the club, brought a whole bunch of his old trophies, and one of them was from the 1965 Grand American.
Wow.
That old Miller's Rock had won. But I worked in the RV industry, and I worked in the cabinet shop, so I built us a trophy case, and we put a lot of that Laverne Miller stuff in that trophy case, and that's still there at the club. But that was just a great club, and it was a little intimidating, but those guys took us under their wings, and a couple of them I'll get to in a little bit, and he's kind of leading up to that here. But that was a fun club. I loved to be a part of it. We both did, and it was just a great experience. But it was Mike Colder who was in that club, Terry's uncle. He was a little bit older guy, but he really took us under his wing, and we'd pleasure hunt together a whole lot, and he taught us a lot of the rules. Yeah, and it wasn't just Mike that taught us, or helped us with rules. Back then, we actually had rules meetings, meetings where they discussed rules and things like that. Things were a little different back then. We had one of the events they had was the Hoosier State Championship.
Right.
And they would always, before that came up in March every year, just kind of have a rule breakdown and kind of make sure all their judges were, on top of things. And I always liked that and learned a lot. But Mike was the one that really took us out and helped us put these rules into play. We hunted together a lot. And, one thing that was a little bit intimidating, all these guys that I mentioned most of them were walker dog guys, and that dominated the club in the area. And here my brother and I come in with our little red dogs,
Yeah.
But honestly, at the time we had some decent ones, and still looking back, they were pretty decent. But Mike was a huge IU and even more Bobby Knight fan. He was one of those diehard throw stuff at the screen fans.
Yeah, okay.
That was Mike.
So he emulated Bob Knight's style.
He really did. But but I remember he even named a walker dog Bobby Knight.
Okay.
And I remember he hunted one night when we went hunting, and we were guiding, and his dog got out of pocket a little bit, and he got hit on the dang road. I still remember that ate at me so hard that night, because didn't hear him. Couldn't, at that time they didn't, tracking collars were out, but just the old beep beep ones. Sure. Maybe, but he wasn't picking anything up really at the time. And then we're driving around looking for him, and we see him laying on the road, and it was just like, oh man. Yeah. That was hard.
Sure.
But anyways, and then later on, Mike had another dog he called her Rockin' Robin. She was off of Minkler's Kansas Thunder.
Okay.
And just a good dog. But he always had some pretty good stock. But so, not just that, but he also believed in if you want a competition hunt, make sure you have a decent dog that gives you a chance,
Sure. Yeah.
And but so we got to hunt a whole lot with Robin, but yeah, another thing I really remember about the club is we used to pleasure hunt a lot together, during the week with a couple of the club members. I remember the last night of season in January, would have been the end of January. It's kind of a weird day. It was kind of warmer. And that night the coon moved like I've never seen before or after. And people probably think I'm crazy that I'm way off, but we treed 30 coons that night.
Wow.
And hunted from dawn till, or from dark till daylight.
You didn't want to stop. I
did not want to stop.
Yeah.
And it was just all night long.
Yeah.
And we had more. I think we saw a total of like 37 that night. And people think you're crazy to say that, but that's the truth, But I remember that night it was Mike and I and his brother Sonny were along, and then my brother and I, and then another guy named Larry Smith.
Nice.
and they were all club guys. But I'll never forget that hunt, and I've never seen anything even close to it before or since then.
Yeah.
But that was just a good hunt. But some other hunts that we went, or rather I went with Mike to, is be like the World Hunt, the zones, and a couple times to Autumn Oaks and things like that. I remember a couple times went to Palmyra, Missouri with him, and that's where I met the Chicken Man. Probably not anybody you've known, but a guy named the Chicken Man drove a green RV bus, kind of a homemade bus or whatever. And that was kind of, you'd have to know the guy.
Okay.
He was a little different, but they called him the Chicken Man. But nevertheless, I always looked up to Mike and loved being around him and loved hunting with him and just thought a lot of him. But yeah, eventually he got cancer and it got him, and I remember the last time hunting with him, he really, really struggled, but man, it was good to have him out there. But I remember that last hunt. Yeah.
You've already talked about a few good memories that you have associated with hounds. It's
it's
lasting memories.
It's for some reason, talking about mentors, he was it.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a lot of good people in the club, sound like.
Yeah, and there was none better than him. And the club still has an annual Mike Calder Memorial
nice.
event that they have every year. And the first year we had it, I designed the picture that went on the plaque for it. So there are two pictures that I took of Mike. One was Mike shining up a tree with his old spotlight, and the second one was him walking Robin in a cornfield. And I got it kind of from this angle. So those two pictures are incorporated on that plaque, and they still use that same picture and same plaque, and it's so cool to me when I see that.
Yeah, I gotta get down there to Columbia City and see some of that stuff.
But I remember when one thing before, a couple of years before he passed, he won the Laverne Miller Award.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was a pretty big, pretty special to him. It meant a lot to him, and they actually buried him with that. He wanted that with him, and then after that, his wife gave me his belt light and his old. He was kind of superstitious about this lead strap that he would use in competition.
Oh, lucky strap.
Okay. His lucky strap.
I gotcha.
So I still have both of those today.
Very cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
So yeah, and several years ago, I had no idea, but I was really surprised when the Walker Association awarded me with that same award, that Laverne Miller Award, and he's the first guy I thought of.
Yeah,
and yeah, he would have been tickled. So yeah, I still think of him often.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Good mentor.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's definitely some good ones there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to end our talking on competition, I guess we've talked a lot about a lot of our mentors. We should talk some about our dogs, maybe.
Yeah.
I talked about having the bow dog, and we didn't travel hardly with him at all. We hit the local clubs there. I think we went to Winter Classic once, and maybe we went to Black and Tan Days a couple of times. Went to Autumn Oaks a couple of times with him, but it was after him. I still had him, but I was looking for something that was a little, like I said, we burned him out at maybe 2.5 years old. So
yeah,
he wasn't the same with company as he was before that.
Yeah.
So I actually got another young Black and Tan from Gene Hicks again. That was a really nice young prospect, and he ended up getting in some poison or something. I don't know. I was at work one day. I got a message that he was real poor. He's like 6 months old only. And I got home. By the time I got home, he had already passed. And that was another time when I was like, dang.
Yeah.
It sent me back again, and I was feeling pretty rough about that. But I got a lot of support from, you know how it is with coon hunters. They're always willing to help you out or to help you any way they can. And I got a message from a guy named Tim McKee, who had bought a dog named Sun Making History, who was kind of popular in our part at the time. And he had a young litter on the ground. And I think he had I think the dog was 3.5, 4 months old. And it was he kept 2 males, and he was going to get rid of one of them and just focus on one. And I ended up going and getting him. And I don't know, I just took him out a couple of times, and I think he was 5.5 months old the first time. I'm just walking him through the woods, and I've hunted young dogs before, and just trying to get them acclimated to the woods at night and what you deal with. And I don't know, this dog wasn't like some of the other ones I had. He wasn't staying around me really. He was getting out of range, and then all of a sudden I just hear him just let out a dying locate and just fall treed, and I get up there, and he's on the side of where I used to have a feeder bucket at. I don't know, hot track. I don't know if he had a coon or not. I couldn't find the coon, but there was definitely some scent there because he was absolutely going berserk, and I knew I had something then. We called him Pete, and it was then I looped in a guy named Jeremy Vaught, who lived about 30 minutes down the road, and Jeremy was the guy I knew from competition hunts. He hunted dogs for other people sometimes, and actually gave him half a Pete to kind of help me. If we're going to be, I felt like with the job that I had, I'm working 3 on, 2 off, 3 on, 2 off, that kind of rotation. And if you're doing that, it's on those nights I can't hunt on those other nights because I'm going to be at work. And I feel like you can't hunt half the time and have a dog that's going to compete at the highest level that we wanted to. So he would keep him up there in Loudon, and then it was 30 minutes from me. And whenever he had to go on, he worked like a week on, week off type shift, and I would take him and hunt him. And the dog turned out really nice. It was real natural from a young age. Kind of a straight line ambush type dog, and we did good with him. We won some casts at, we won some casts at Autumn Oaks and in different places. Some other registries, we won some casts at some of those major events, and then in 2017, he may just be under a year old, or under 2 years old, or just turned 2, one of the two. But that's whenever we doubled up at the 10-mile zone, got first place there, and made it to the World Finals, and that was probably the height of my competition. That was a cool moment. We got to go to Elberton and stand in the line. We talk about standing in that line with the other top
World
100.
Finals.
That's kind of a proud moment to be there and be a part of that. And that's something I'll never forget. That was a fun time. I never was a great handler. I never will claim to be a good handler, but that was one of my best moments hunting with competition dogs. And the Pete dog, he kind of set the bar for me just as far as a competitive dog that I would have now goes. And the dog I have now is actually out of him. The hang dog that I hunt now is out of Pete. So and actually Pete they've still somebody else has still been running him. I don't know about just lately, but he made the final cast at Autumn Oaks last year. Pete did.
He did. Yeah, he did.
David Vanover over in, I think he lives in Virginia now, and Lance Belcher in Tennessee. They got him. Sold him to those guys right before, or like a month before I took this job, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to compete with him, and they've done great with him. They've done things with him that I would have never done.
I remember hearing about that dog's name before I even knew you.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Dogs like that don't come around every day, but
Yeah. What about you? I know of one dog you're going to mention, but I'm sure that there's some others you want to mention.
Well, there's a couple. We went through a lot of hounds over the years, but I've got a couple that kind of are my standouts. But one thing that you mentioned that is that I can relate to is you mentioned trading off or prepping dogs for events and this and that. Having a partner to help you do that, that's big. That helps a lot. And my brother and I used to do that all the time. If I couldn't, we used to hunt together a lot, but we would solo dogs a lot. One drop, we'd drop one, and next drop another one, or what have you. Did a whole lot of that, But on days when maybe I couldn't go, he could, or especially if we were trying to get one ready for the hunts, and that's all important. But the standouts. One of the first ones I hunted, I mentioned some of the ones that I hunted before, but a couple of the standouts. One was, and it was actually kind of early on, was a walker dog named End of the Trail Bandit was his name.
Oh, yeah,
he was owned by Carl and Jason Peters. Father and son lived in Kennelville, Indiana. Old Carl's one of those guys, has a big, long handlebar mustache. He's always had one, but good guy. And his boy Jason, he was a little younger than me. And I'll just tell the world right now, Jason was scared of the dark. So that's why they put the dog in my hands.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
I'm probably putting it on a little bit thick there, but Jason might not admit it. But I think that's what we used to always say. But no, they got this dog. He was just young. They got him out of Kentucky, and he had a little bad habit of treeing possums. And but that was really probably the dog that I really learned a whole lot the most about. I honed my handling skills with that dog.
Yeah.
And I won a lot of casts with him, made him a grand night, back under the old rules and everything. And but I lost a lot of casts that I should also won.
Sure.
I just gave, a lot of that was handling error, but that's how you learn.
Oh,
And they kept paying the entry fees. The other thing I remember about that dog was he got to be my buddy because I kept him down at my house, and I didn't even need to use put a dog box on the truck. He would jump on the back of the bed, and I would drive through downtown Columbia City, going south of town to my hunting spots. Didn't even think twice of it. That's just the type of dog he was. And I never, during the week, I never had a dog box on. And I did, you wouldn't do that today, probably not. But him and I just got to be good buds, and he would, anytime he would see me, if they had him up there or whatever, I'd go over to pick him up. He'd be out on the chain while he, I just always loved that dog.
Yeah.
We just had that tight connection,
Sure.
But yeah. Speaking of possums, when I made him a night champion, there was a couple. I remember one time I went to Dromesville, Ohio, I think, and it was down at the end of the cast in a qualifier, and he trees a possum. I've got a big lead, and I'm all but ready to go to the world hunt with this dog, and he trees a possum. I'm just like, oh man, we got to do something about it. And we finally got him broke off of that. But yeah, I was that grandson of old Hillbilly Mac.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah. So that was, but I just took him to Walker Days a bunch. But the other thing I remember about hunting that dog a lot was, so I worked in the RV industry and I hunted a lot at night, always be tired. But those guys would drive and Carl and Jason would sit up front and they argued over everything. It didn't matter. They were always arguing. I remember that. It was about something. It was all good, but just some of the memories I have it. And I'd be in the back and I'd sleep on the way to the hunt. They'd go in and enter the dog when it's time for draw. They'd come and wake me up and I'd go in and take over from there. And after the hunt was over, I'd jump in the back and sleep again.
There you go.
So that was kind of hunted him for several years. I hunted that dog.
Yeah.
And had a lot of fun with him. But so he's really the one that I honed a lot of handling skills with that dog over the next couple of years. But probably my number one dog that is still my yardstick today was a red bone I had right soon after that. I already had him at that time as a pup, but he would ran a lot of track, but would not tree. He started running track when he was 6-7 months old. Just would not tree. He'd take one to a tree and he'd just go on and find another track. Finally, we gave up on him. He was about 14 months old. And we sold him for $200 to John Diffendaffer. So this was like in July. So later that fall, fast forward that fall at a club meeting in November, our president, Steve Dunn, was telling me, he said, man, I have hunted with this red dog. You need to go check him out. And I just kind of, didn't really ask a whole lot. And next club meeting, the next month, he said the same thing. He said, I've hunted with this red dog a couple times. I'm telling you need to go check him out. He's the real deal. Yeah. And I asked him more about it and who he's hunting with. And he said, well, this guy named John Diffendaffer. And I said, well, what's the dog's name? He said, I asked him if his name is Tex, and he said, yeah. And I'm like, what? So anyways, I couldn't go hunting with him right away, but my brother Paul did. Yeah. And Paul went hunted with him one night, and he came back to me, and he said, man, you got to just go to the bank. You don't need to hunt with him. Just go to the bank, get some cash. And I said, well, how much do I get? Because he didn't want to sell him. He said, you just go get some cash. And he said to get a couple $1,000.
Wow.
So I remember... ended up just laying it out there on the picnic table. First begin with, he wasn't going to sell him, but that's kind of so sold him for $200, and he 6 months later ended up buying him back. And he was just and asking him, he was just a pleasure hunter. John tied him up and didn't hunt him till the first night of kill season, and then he said, what do you mean? No, he treated fine. Treated the first time he took it. But so yeah, I had a lot of fun with that dog, and as far as he was just overall balanced, and I really got him to where one thing I learned with him that still always stuck with me. He was a little bit older by the time we put him in his first hunt, and I felt like he was one that his mentality was mature. He was matured mentally and everything. And it just made a difference. Just breezed through all the way to Grand with him. Yeah. And did it in pretty short order. But there wasn't really anything. He was just matured and just well balanced. Hey, he lost Cass too, but he sure won his fair share of them. And I loved to compete against the best. Yeah. I for some reason I just wanted that. Hey, I wanted to hunt with the best dogs and just see how he stacked up with them. And I said he didn't win them all, but he won his fair share. But
you guys won some bigger hunts with Tex, did you not?
Yeah. Well, we worked in the RV industry, and we used to always say you can't take any time off unless maybe for your own funeral, and that was about it. But so we didn't get to travel a whole lot. Sure. And that kind of, I wish I could have done that more with him, but I wasn't going to give him up to just anybody. But Autumn Oaks was one we could do because it was close enough. And Redbone Days, we always made sure that was 4th of July, so we usually head off on that, that week. So, but yeah, probably Autumn Oaks. I ended up putting him in 5 years in a row, and 4 times he was a high-scoring Redbone male.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good.
That's
Yeah,
pretty good, huh?
twice he was the National Grand Night champion
Awesome.
of breed.
That's awesome.
Of breed, yeah. So, and as far as the club, we had the club got us a plaque, for any national champion, Grand Night champions that from Autumn Oaks that from the club members, and he and that Mike Puckett Shaker dog are the only two-time winners of that title there at the club.
Very cool
Yeah,
distinction.
it's kind of but no, he's like I said, he's still my yardstick today. And then we hunted some other dogs, some decent dogs that my brother hunted a lot for. Herb Vaughn in Goshen was one guy that we got to know and hunted with a lot, and he had the kind of the same strain of red bones. He had some of the Fireball stuff. One older dog he had was Old Banjo. My brother pretty much hunted him from nothing to where he was. And then some others that we had was Bozo that my brother hunted mostly of that I was supposed to get. He needed some money, and I paid him for this pup, and 2 days later he's treeing house cats, and he doesn't give him to me, and he ended up hanging on to me, plus my money.
That's a pretty good deal there.
But then another dog that was off Old Banjo that's probably you hear a lot more is a dog named B3 was also off of him. So that's another one that had been sold as a bear dog, and he was running too much trash, they called it in North Carolina. So we ended up getting him back, or Herb did, and then we hunted him for Herb. Paul did most of the hunting on him, but I put a win or two on him as well, B3. But yeah, and so there's some of those. And then during that time too, I was running some Beagle stuff.
Yeah.
So Beagle stuff in the tried about 2.5 years. I was running Coonhounds and Beagle trials religiously. Till finally it was too much.
Yeah,
I had to get rid of the Beagle part and just go back to Coonhounds.
Yeah.
So,
You've talked a lot about the Columbia City Club. Is that where you making the shift from just being a competition hunter to maybe being more on the other side of the table and being an active or being an officer or being on the administrative side?
It was actually Columbia City. There became an officer of the club. One of the things I did for several years, a good number of years, actually, I don't remember how many years it was, but a long time, was a corresponding officer. So that's, dealing with all the packets with UKC and all that kind of stuff, sending in the reports, so, that's, I learned all that stuff and familiar with all that. And I think that helps us. And so, that was the first one. Eventually I was a officer of the Redbone Coonhound Association, and I did the hunt director thing with them for a while, and I loved that part.
Yeah. And
then eventually was vice president before I came up here. But what about you?
Yeah, for me, when I took this job, I was 29 years old.
Yeah.
And I was 28 years old when I took the job, and before that, I hadn't been a lot of, as far as being an officer of clubs, I never did that. I tried to be as active as I could in all the area clubs. One of those smaller clubs in the area, I was a elected vice president officer of that club, but we didn't have very many events or very many duties at that time, so wasn't very active in that. I guess where I really got my chops at down there, and where I got this passion for putting on events and being on that administrative side of it, was the Track Down Cancer event that we did. Yep. I've talked about that before on different podcasts and whatnot, but every year we did that to raise money for the American Cancer Society, and I made a lot of relationships with people in East Tennessee and North Alabama and North Georgia with that event. And I think that's where I got just the love for putting on hunts, and I think that's really where my passion is in the sport. I love going hunting. I love going to hunts. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the best handler, but I love going and putting on a hunt, and yeah, that's what led me here, really. Yeah. I mean, that's how this whole thing got started at UKC. I guess when you made the shift to get to UKC, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. But going back to years, I remember that was part of in your resume a little bit. You talked about that, and we reached out to Alan Roberts, who used to be a field rep, is again now, but he had nothing but good things to say about you. And quite frankly, I didn't know you at all, So it was we kind of banked on that, and it's turned out well. So,
well, talking about making the move to UKC, I had a pretty good job at an automotive manufacturing factory down there in Tennessee, and I was the manager in the purchasing department, and made a good living down there, but I couldn't travel very much. It was a lot of working, and I was missing a lot of stuff, it seemed like. And I saw the job posting one night and decided to kind of go after it and send in the resume and everything. And, the whole thing is just kind of a blur, and ended up getting offered the job. And that was probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, We had just had my daughter. She was less than a year old at the time, and 10 hours away from all of my family. All of my family's there. My wife's, that's not the case for her.
Yeah.
Hers is spread out a little bit, but all of mine is there in East Tennessee. And I think the most scary thing is what you just said is, you know, at that point, I was 28 years old. I had been in Coonhounds for right at 10 years, and competition hunting, even less than that, and relatively unknown outside of probably my general area, maybe the black and tan breed a little bit. But that was a scary part of accepting the job that I didn't really talk to anybody about. A lot of it was about the move, but in my mind, I'm thinking, what's the perception of this? Are people going to accept me as being a Coonhound manager here if they don't know who I am, or if I don't have any well-known, you know, accolades in the sport, really? And
I can relate.
That was
to
big. I was really nervous about that.
Yep, I can relate to that. I was a little older when I started, you know, but I can definitely relate to that because, and it kind of goes back to, I think you and I have had this conversation. You got to earn your respect,
Sure.
you know, and a lot of that has to do with just doing things right. You're going to make mistakes and things like that, but everybody does, you know. But wanting to do things right. But yeah, you know, for me, Todd Kellum first approached me at Redbone Days in July at LaGrange, Indiana, is where it was. And when he mentioned it, I thought, well, this is kind of odd that he, you know, but so I just kind of chuckled and it was like, man, that would be, I never thought about it, but I thought, dang, that would be kind of cool. But I had a good job making pretty good bank, you know, in the RV industry at the time. Had just bought a house not long before that, you know, and kind of tied down actually. And then it was we just kind of left it at that. And then about a month or two later, he called me again and he was like, man, I'm serious, you know. And then I just kind of realized that, well, I guess this dude is serious, you know?
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, well, I'm interested in it, you know, but I need some time to think about it. And, you know, for me, if I would commit to it, it would be, I'm looking at it for the long-term commitment, you know, if I do. And I'm going to have some time to think about it. So I did, and took several weeks or whatever. And you know, the one thing was just having a new home and everything else, you know, it was tough. Yeah. So I can relate to, you know, kind of what you went through. It's a big decision.
Absolutely.
When you got to move, you know, I was in Indiana, so I didn't have to move nearly as far, but still, so yeah, you know, finally I did decide, you know what, I think I'm gonna do it. And at the time I'm thinking, how cool is this going to be? You're going to be working in something you love to do, and all you do is work at UKC and just hunt.
Right.
Perfect. You know, but I know I can't hunt at all the oaks in the world anymore. Some of those things we talked about to begin with. But I thought even then, but as you now also now know, it doesn't quite work that way. And it seems like kind of the opposite, the way it's turned out. But no, so that was in November of 2004 is when I ended up coming up here, or ended up starting. So it's been 19 years later now.
Yeah, wow.
So, but yeah, you know, going back to the competition thing, you mentioned that you didn't feel like you were ever a good handler. I always loved sports, and I loved that competing thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not boasting or anything, but I loved handling dogs and still do. And it was and kind of an addiction to me, really. You know, if there was an event, it didn't matter what format, what it was, anything that you could get to, we went if we had something that was, you know, competitive anyways, you know. But so not just that, but I think those experiences really help here too. Sure. I really, you know, it's hey, there's a lot of people that want a whole lot more than I ever did, you know, but and there's a lot that you know, also want a good share. But and I got to judge the World Finals a couple times, you know, in 2000 and 2003, I think, and you know, so I loved all that stuff. Sure. And that's probably the biggest part that I miss is the competition handling dogs, because it was an addiction to me. But it's a lot of those things that personal experiences that were imperative for me, for sure, you know. But you know, and all that said, probably at the end of the day, I would say my biggest accomplishment that I still put at the top was that Laverne Miller Award for some reason. Oh. That just, and honestly, I think Mike Calder had a whole lot to do with that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a wrap on today's episode. It's kind of out of the box for us to get on here and talk about it, but now you guys may know us a little bit better, and we hope you enjoyed this kind of episode, and we hope you guys have a good one. Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.